I was the one who saw their lights first, and I want to be honest about what that felt like, because the records will say first contact, having wandering clans, the area array, and make it sound clean. It wasn't clean. It was 3 in the morning on the platform, my coffee gone cold, and a smear of drive wash bleeding into my long-range feed where nothing should have been. I'd stood that post for 6 years. Before me, my watch mother stood it for 30. Before her, the array's first engineers stood it while pouring the foundation rings into the mountain rock, 70-some thousand years after the system had been written off as dead. Nobody on the area array ever expected to use the thing we'd built. That was the discipline. You maintain the weapon you hope never fires, exactly as if you know it will. I called it in soft the way we trained. No alarms. Alarms invite mistakes. I logged the drive wash, ran it against the old catalog, and there it was, sitting quiet in our archive for longer than most empires last. A hull signature matched to the Haven wandering clans, last recorded departing this system 72,000 years ago, in the years when Earth was still bleeding from whatever had nearly killed it. They had left. The record was plain about that. They had judged the world finished and gone looking for somewhere kinder. I want to say I felt triumph. I felt something quieter and harder to name, the specific ache of watching a door you've kept oiled for 72,000 years finally swing. Their ship came down through the cloud deck slow, the way a wary animal moves, and I understood why. From their charts, this was a corpse of a system. What they were flying into instead was a sky laced with rings of light, an array of shield towers running the spine of the range like vertebrae, and far above all of it, dark against the stars, the long shapes of vessels that had never needed to hide because nothing had ever come to threaten them. I watched their ship hesitate twice before it committed to landing. I would have hesitated too. The one who came out to meet me called herself Sail, navigator elder of the retrieval clan, and she walked like a woman counting her own footsteps so she wouldn't have to look up. When she finally did look up at the towers, at the long ships riding silent overhead, at the shield generators breathing pale light into the dawn, her face did the thing every face does in this work. Not awe. Worry. The specific worry of someone realizing the math she's lived by her whole life was wrong. "We came for the caches," she said. Her voice was flat, the way people get flat when they're holding something back by main force. Old supply vaults, buried before the clans left. We were told no one would be here to mine them. "No one's minded them in the way you mean," I said. "We've kept them anyway." That was the part that broke her composure, just slightly, not the towers, not the ships. The idea that we had tended graves we didn't owe anything to. Behind her, her crew had started to disembark, and I watched the same realization move through them one at a time, the way weather moves through a valley. A young weapons deck froze on the ramp, staring up at one of our long ships hanging silent at high orbit, its hull catching sunlight like a second moon. An older woman, ship's engineer, by the calluses on her hands, looked at the shield towers and did the math out loud without meaning to, muttering power draw figures that didn't resolve to anything she recognized, then went quiet when they didn't. None of them reached for a weapon. None of them needed telling not to. The scale of what they were looking at did that work on its own. "Your charts have us listed as a cautionary marker," I told Sail, because it felt cruel to let her keep guessing. "Abandoned system, no recovery curve expected. We've read the entry. We don't hold it against whoever wrote it. The instruments back then weren't lying. The world really was close to finished." Then how, she stopped herself, started again. "What changed it?" "Nothing dramatic," I said. "No miracle, no single answer. People decided to keep building slowly for longer than any of them would live to see finished, on the chance it would matter to someone eventually. Most never knew if it would. They built anyway." Her people had left in the bad years, when the home system was cratered and quiet, and every long-range scan said dying world, no recovery curve, abandon. They weren't deserters by their own accounting. They were survivors who made the call their instruments told them to make. They buried what they couldn't carry, seed banks, old archives, the bones of their own dead they couldn't take with them, and they wrote down the coordinates and they left, certain there'd be nothing here to come back to but a marker. I didn't begrudge them that, we never had. The ones who stayed, my watchmother's people, didn't stay out of anger at the ones who left. They stayed because someone had to, and because somewhere in those bad years a decision got made that has held for 72,000 years since. If anyone ever came back, friend or otherwise, Earth would not be a grave when they found it. It would be a door, armed if it had to be, open if it could be. That decision is the only inheritance I really care about. Not the towers, not the ships, the decision underneath them. I walked Sail up through the array myself, because protocol said a clan elder got a human escort and not a drone, and because I wanted to see her face when she understood what 72,000 years of patience actually looked like up close. We passed the original foundation stones, still load-bearing, still doing exactly the work they were poured to do. We passed 3 generations of retrofit work layered over each other like sediment, each generation building on the last instead of tearing it down and starting clever. That's the thing nobody from outside ever expects about us. We are not fast. We are not clever in the way conquerors are clever. We are patient in a way that looks, from a distance, like nothing happening at all, right up until the day it is everything happening at once, exactly on schedule, 72,000 years late and not 1 day early. The vault she'd come for was 3 kilometers under the range, in rock our ancestors had chosen specifically, because it would survive anything short of the planet itself breaking apart. We opened it for her. The seed banks were intact, climate true, regenerated twice over the millennia by caretakers who never expected thanks for the work. Her people's dead were exactly where the old coordinates said, tended, marked, named in a script half her own crew couldn't read anymore because their own language had drifted that far from the people who'd carried it away. She walked the rows slowly, reading what names she could, fingers tracing the rest. Twice she stopped at a marker and stood long enough that her crew glanced at each other, unsure whether to wait or withdraw. Nobody withdrew. There are some things a person needs witnessed, not left alone. These weren't on any retrieval manifest, she said finally, gesturing at a row of small markers set apart from the rest. These are children. We didn't have time when we left to bury anyone properly. They're not from your ship, I said. They're from the ones who didn't make it to your ship in time. Somebody buried them after your people had gone, and somebody after that decided they belonged here with the rest of what was left behind, so they wouldn't be forgotten twice. She stood in that vault a long time after that. I let her. Why, she finally said, not the whole question, she didn't need to finish it. Because you might come back, I told her. And we didn't know if you'd come back as family or as something else entirely. We built for both. We just decided a long time ago which one we'd hope for. I won't pretend the clans left that day as anything but changed. Sail took her caches. She took her dead, finally, properly, home to wherever home had become for her people in 72,000 years of wandering. She didn't apologize because there was nothing to apologize for, and we didn't ask her to because there was nothing owed. What passed between us instead was smaller and harder than an apology. An accounting, settled plainly, between 2 peoples who'd made very different choices in the same bad years, and had both, in their own ways, survived them. Before her ship lifted, she asked me one more thing, standing at the base of the ramp with the array's towers behind her catching the morning light. What do you tell the ones who ask why you kept it all this time? Why you didn't just let the dead stay dead and the door stay shut? I thought about the watchmothers before me, the foundation stones still doing their work after 72,000 years, the seed banks regenerated by hands that never met the hands that planted them. We tell them the truth, I said. We were never waiting for an enemy. We were waiting to see who came back. We just made sure that whoever it was, they'd find a world that remembered them, and a world that could survive them in equal measure. She didn't answer that. She didn't need to. Her ship lifted into a sky we'd kept clear and bright and watched for 72,000 years, and I went back to my post, because the door doesn't close just because one ship used it. Somewhere out past the long dark, there are other clans who left in the same bad years, with the same bad math, and the same buried dead waiting on the same patient ground. We'll be here, we always were,